So, in a world where there's so much that can be fixed in post-production, what is the value of getting the sound right on the set?
Well, I mean, on a fundamental level, what we do is kind of the same thing as the camera does. We capture a performance. And so when an actor is being vulnerable and really putting themselves out there and, trying to capture the essence of a certain person or character that they're portraying, um, we owe them just as much as the camera department does to capture their true performance accurately and correctly and translate that to the audience. So we can argue that that can all be done later, but we can also argue that we can CGI a whole movie too, and that can still be content. But is it the same thing? No, it's not identical to how they actually portrayed it on set, and that's our goal, is to capture that.
Love it. Yeah, so you told me offset in text. You said film is 50% military and 50% carnival. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean the ratios might be flexible there, but so the idea there with both of those things, there's no real barrier to entry. Like anybody can join the military more or less. Anybody can go off and join a carnival more or less. And usually the level of success that you have there depends a lot on you and what your goals are and what your talents and abilities are, but also the film set operates with a very distinct hierarchy and very distinct branches, and everybody's sort of classified by their job, and those jobs have specific duties, and they're very schedule dependent and very preparation dependent and all that. But at the same time, we're just making a movie. It's art, it's fun, it's creative, it's, all these different things. So it kind of blends together into this weird mix of carnival and military where, sure, we're throwing a clown through a forest here, but we have to do it safely because we don't want to kill this actor. So we need real heavy duty equipment that's going to hold them upright. And it's just like a combination of this, like art and technology.
Wow, I love that. Yeah, so what got you into it? Was it the art or was it kind of the industry, like just the job itself?
Well, I mean, it started for me with being a young kid, and HBO was brand new, and VHS tapes were brand new, and my parents were, very open and forward about us watching movies and stuff, and I really loved watching movies of all kinds when, from as far back as I can remember. I mean, I think I saw E.T. in the theater, and it just blew me away. Like every kind of major production that I saw just blew me away, and I had a deep love for movies going into high school. And I found out there that we had a filmmaking club, like an extracurricular thing. The technology wasn't great. The resources weren't great. We had VHS cameras, and we were editing from tape to tape, and it was very rustic. But it was an inlet to this possibility that just any random person can go out and do this. And once I sort of had that idea in my head, and then further explored it to actually being fun to do, and then also actually being something that we could maybe make a career out of, I really started putting all of my energy towards that. I had some success early on. The first movie that I made in high school won a Best Special Effects Award at a local high school level film festival. It was not anything prestigious at all, but like it was early encouragement that we were, doing something right. And as the 90s trudged on, we got some awesome movies. Like I don't know how filled in you are on 90s movies, but that's one of my favorite decades for film, and it really like amplified my energy towards that end. And I ended up studying in school, and I got my first introductory job at a local TV station doing master control. which taught me a lot of the principles and technology involved in broadcasting, which is, related, but also quite different. Then I started PAing on local movies and stuff through a enthusiast group called the Upstate Independents, which was just local people trying to, do whatever they can and dreaming of Hollywood and stuff like that. So through the connections I had there, I ended up getting hired as a set PA on the movie The Time Machine through DreamWorks. I got assigned to the sound department as a production assistant, and the mixer there was a guy named David McMillan, who was a multiple Academy Award winner. He'd worked on Scorsese films and all kinds of stuff, and he was extremely generous with his knowledge and his enthusiasm for sound. And the more I learned about it, the more I realized that it clicked with my personality and my skill set and my goals. And I really just started diving into that as a career path. I was saving up money to move to Los Angeles because I had worked in New York City, and I hated that. I think it's very important to find a city that speaks to you. I decided to move to LA, and then 4 months later, 9/11 happened. That really cemented the Los Angeles idea for me. So a month later, I packed everything up and drove out here, and I've been here ever since.
Wow. That's incredible. So I'm really curious too, because I think a lot of younger people that are trying to get into film, it's those early on gigs that they're trying to get, which is really tough. Would you say it was just mostly networking for you, or was it like
Oh yeah.
portfolio work?
No, because I mean, I had no portfolio. People don't want to see something off of a VHS tape, and film people didn't really consider network broadcast experience relevant, even though it very much is. I was fortunate that the place that I moved to was about 4 blocks away from the American Film Institute, and I started going there and pitching myself to the master's students, and they didn't have a sound department, so they had to hire sound people for their films, and that's where I got my start. Doing a bunch of thesis films for AFI students, and just networking my ass off. Like I was going to every publicly open event that I could find, and just forcing myself to talk to strangers and trying to weed out which ones were being serious about it and which ones were just showboating. And eventually I found some people that were serious about it and were actually getting stuff made, and managed to get hired on a couple of things. The very first one, the first feature that I mixed, it was kind of an accident that I got hired because I was supposed to be the boom operator. And 3 days before they started shooting, whoever the mixer was, I don't even know, dropped out because he got a better offer on something else, which happens, but not 3 days before production. That was a pretty raw move on that guy's part. But either way, they called me up in a panic and they said, "Are you a mixer too?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And that's how I got hired. So I didn't have any equipment. It was actually for another film school called the LA Film School. And it was a situation where they had their own equipment room. So I got to use their stuff. And it was like a $200,000 budget horror movie that Roger Corman co-produced. I don't know if you're familiar with the Roger Corman studios, but he launched a whole lot of careers through the 70s and 80s, and it was kind of a point of pride to have my first feature produced by him as well, especially since I went on to doing bigger and better things. But that whole first year, I spent basically every available moment trying to further my network and further my experience level, and just be able to show people that I wasn't screwing around, and that I knew what I was doing, and that I was able to deliver on what they needed. Because it's a serious position on a production too. Like if you really screw up the sound, that can absolutely sink a production. So I put the majority of my effort into credibility, I think.
Yeah, it's funny. As you're talking about this, I heard you say on a podcast, "Never do free work," and I was curious why you said that.
It's extremely rare, and I would even say unheard of, that nobody that's making a film doesn't want to make money off of it. I mean, almost every film ever made is for profit if available. And I've dedicated more than half my life to this craft. I've put in tens of thousands of hours of education and training, and thousands and thousands of dollars spent on equipment, and all to be able to be the person that you can rely on to create half your production. If you think about it, we look at the screen, but we also listen to the whole movie as well, and that's every bit as important as the visual part. So if you value the effort that you've put into creating yourself as an asset to something that's definitely trying to make money, then yeah, you shouldn't work for free.
That's so interesting. It's funny. I think it's a little bit different in the industry I'm in because some of my best work or best gigs that I've gotten with people is working for free. But I really like that mentality. I think maybe early on, it's just like, for at least for me, I had to do whatever I could. And, if I offered free work to somebody, then that was the only way I could
They're
even.
going to take it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, here's the thing, though. They're always going to say yes to free, right?
Yeah.
Unless they don't have a choice. So if you take away that choice, they're not just going to not make their thing. They're either going to keep looking for somebody who is free, or they're going to pay you. If they keep looking for somebody who is free, then they don't care about you one bit.
That's so true. Yeah, I think for me, it was building the relationship, and that's where the value, at least in my industry, is. So that at least the free work is able to get me that relationship. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's so interesting.
Well, I'm not going to say that doesn't exist, but also that relationship is never going to be like, it's always going to have that one piece of data that I got this guy for free. You know, even if it turns out that they like you and you like them and things work out later, like that exists in their head. And there's a lot of people who are very much inclined to just get as much as they can for as little as they can, no matter what. And if you're trying to just work, if that's all you want to do is work and not worry about what it is or who it is or any of that, then that doesn't matter as much. But if you're trying to build a career that has some prestige and some status, then it starts with you valuing yourself more than just having the exposure. And this is something that literally everyone in the industry battles with. I'm not saying that my answer is universally correct, and I'm not saying that somebody who does take free work is a bad person or anything like that, but it will serve you more to value yourself at least that much than just jumping at every opportunity just because it exists. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Yeah, that's really good advice. I want to switch up gears a little bit and
Sure.
talk about your role as a sound mixer. I feel like it's one of those roles that's really kind of mysterious. Like, we hear the sound in the film, but we don't really know what it looks like day to day for you on a set. So what does it look like? I know there's probably a lot of pre-planning when you get a gig that goes into it. What's one of the first steps that you do for like a feature film?
Well, ideally, read the script. It's not always available, but that's generally my first request is to actually read the script. And I go over it and not just analyze the dialogue, but also like the descriptive elements of the script that might give clues as to other audible things that are going on in each individual scene. But also, you want to look at the locations that are being written down and the amount of characters with dialogue in every scene, because that can be a logistical planning thing that you need to take care of. And also things like, are they in a moving car, or do they get into a car and drive during this scene? Or, there's all kinds of different actions that they could be doing. They get in a gunfight and they're still having conversations. That could be an issue. If they're walking through a demolition scene, or a construction site, or God knows what else. Anything that could be a potential hiccup for the sound department is what I'm looking for first, and also whether or not those are problems that need to be dealt with, or whether it's just sort of a logistical thing that we need to be ready for. And then, generally speaking, if all that stuff is normal and not concerning, the next step for us would be production meetings, where we either talk to the producer, maybe the editor, about what their needs are going to be, what their expectations are going to be, if they have any like giant one takes planned or anything like that we're going to have to be involved with. And then we would go on and do a tech scout or a location scout, where we actually go to the physical locations and see the sets that we're going to be working on. And that's the kind of place where we can work out places that we can hide ourselves, hide equipment, find logistical things like where the bathrooms are and where power is going to be, and, just the general environment that we're going to be working on, because that could be literally anywhere on the planet. So it's all dedicated to making us able on day one to hit the ground running and, get everything with not only quality, but efficiency.
So I know this would vary a lot on a typical film set. What is like the most, or what is the usual way that you're capturing audio? Is it like lavs, boom? I mean, it varies, but what is it typically?
Well, the goal is to get it on one boom first, to get the whole scene on one boom if we can. And if there are things like camera movements or blocking or actor movements or any other situation that prevents the boom from physically getting in the right spot, then we have the options of wiring the actor, which is the most common, running a second boom, which is generally higher quality, but it can also add complexity to the setup. And then we can also hide plant microphones on the set, where you just place a microphone where the actor's going to be, but like behind a vase or some other object, and it's kind of a game of how do we get a microphone in the right spot when this person delivers their lines. So if it's just two people sitting at a table and there's nothing else getting in our way, generally speaking, we can just run a boom microphone. And then development in the last 15 to 20 years has been to wire people as well, regardless of if it's a perfect boomable shot. We probably will still wire them, and that's because of multi-track recording. Pretty much all of the machines now that roll sound are at least 4 tracks, if not 6 or 8. And so that allows us to plug in the boom microphone and then a couple of wires. And if something happens where the boom microphone is either off target for a critical line, or some noise happens that the boom picks up real strongly, it's kind of an insurance policy, and it's become kind of an expected thing nowadays. So generally speaking, we go for the boom mic first, and then add options after that.
So this kind of brings me to my favorite film that you've done and that you've probably talked so much about, which is Whiplash. What was the main way that you guys got audio for that film?
That was all boom. I mean, pretty much 95% of it was boom. Part of the reason for that was J.K. Simmons does not like to wear wires ever, and he will argue against it with anyone that's trying to do it for him. That was the first challenge. Secondly, we didn't want to rely on wires just because the film is so sound centric that we wanted to use the best microphone for any given shot, you know. And if you think about it, like in whatever terms you want, just physics in general, you know, a microphone with a inch or inch and a half diameter element is going to be able to capture sound with better resolution than one with a 2 millimeter element, and that's kind of the size that the lavalier mics are. They've put a lot of, you know, technology into making them sound good, and they do generally sound good, but it's always just a little bit better on boom.
Wow. And I'm assuming like all the lavs that you guys would use are wireless nowadays.
Yeah. And that's another factor that has come a long way in the past 30 years or 40 years. They started using them in the 70s, and they were like the size of a book. The transmitters that they would have to put on people, you know, like bigger than a pack of cigarettes anyway. And it was constantly a challenge to not only just try and find a place to hide those things on actors, but also, you know, anytime you miniaturize something, it kind of takes away its robust abilities, you know. And so when you take a radio station that's normally the size of a building and you shrink it down to the size of a pack of cigarettes, like, there's going to be a lot of compromise that happens there, not only in audio quality, but also in transmission ability. So you're trying to replace a hardwire with something that can be interfered with, that can be, you know, stepped on by some outside source, or can be just blocked by a whole bunch of people or the corner of a building, or, you know, a bunch of metal fencing. There's all kinds of ways that wireless stuff can get messed with, and that's definitely another factor in why we try and prioritize the boom. On top of that is what the actors are doing, and also what they're wearing, because a lot of times there's things that actors need to do for their performance that are just devastatingly bad for the lavalier. For instance, like, there's a lot of people that talk like this, and whenever they say something, they just slap their chest, and that's really, really bad for the lavalier. There's scenes where people take their shirt off or change wardrobe mid-scene, or they're completely naked or whatever. Really hard to lav that, you know. And so it's also important not just to know, you know, what these things do, but also what they excel at and what they can't do.
Yeah. So with a film like Whiplash, you said you're using mostly booms for the audio.
Yeah.
Are you listening to it back live and then listening to it again after you record it to make sure you got it?
Well, I mean, generally speaking, the equipment is good enough now that what you're listening to as you roll is equal to what you're going to get in post. In fact, the old school tape recording machines used to have a second mechanism on them that was called a reference head, and that would actually be placed just after the record head. And so with a tiny little delay, you would hear the recording off of the tape as it was happening. And that was a confidence thing for the people that were rolling on tape. But now that it's all digital and the technology has gotten better with headphone amplifiers and all the other stuff that goes into that, you can listen to a digital recording as it's happening and be confident that that's what's getting recorded.
Yeah, and then so like I know for when I record stuff, I try and record in like 32-bit float. Is that kind of what you guys do as well?
No,
No, totally different.
so analog tape changed over to digital audio tape in the late 90s, and digital audio tape was 16-bit, which is CD quality. And then when hard disk recording started, they bumped it up to 24-bit, and the production sound community has stuck with 24-bit ever since then, even though there are people in the past 5 years or so that have started recording 32-bit float. But if my knowledge on the subject is informing me correctly, basically all that does is mean that you don't have to ride the gain anymore. And the cost is that your files are twice as big as a 24-bit recording. I like to have the control over the gain, and I think a lot of other mixers do as well. But at the same time, like, I don't think 32-bit really gets you any better quality, especially if you have a crew there monitoring things. If it's something that you're doing one man band, like, like camera and maybe even sound at the same time, or there are cases where that can be useful, but I think really it's more of a means to an end to work with people that are doing more like social media content or reality content, or the kind of thing where they can't actively monitor the audio as closely as like a dedicated sound person would. In fact, I don't think there are, other than the Zoom company, I don't think there's any other manufacturers that make like big time sound recording equipment that actually does 32-bit, except maybe some of the Zaxcom stuff, but I haven't really been a user of theirs.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah. I mean, yeah, you're right. Like your whole job is getting the audio right on set. So it's like 32-bit float really isn't needed. So yeah, that's really interesting.
And like
But
I've known about that for a long time, because I mean 32-bit float was actually an option on like Sound Blaster sound cards for PCs in the 90s. Um, and it always just seemed like this way out there thing that was like 16-bit already sounds pretty good. Like, what would you even need that for? Um, and now we know it's a convenience feature. Most of the, as far as I know, actually, most of the 32-bit recorders still put out a 24-bit file. Um, Really, what they're doing is they're moving the data chunk around. Like it has 32 bits to access, but it's only getting 24 of those bits. You know what I mean?
oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I didn't even know
Yeah.
that. Wow. So going back to Whiplash real quick, I heard that,
Yeah.
most of it was pre-recorded. So tell me about that, because that's really interesting. Does that
Yeah.
mean they have to match up every single drum hit has to be perfectly matched up with a pre-recorded
Well,
track?
this is what most of it means. So Damien didn't want to deal with an entire band's worth of problems. And so the entire band is pre-recorded, but we recorded the drums live. And there's two reasons for that. First of all, challenging Miles Teller to play drums accurately to a playback track is more challenging than actually playing the drums. And also faking, like making fake drums that don't make sound so that we can record dialogue, like while he's playing and stuff. Those look awful. They don't look good on camera at all. And it's really hard to fake playing drums in a way that they don't make sound, because you have to hit cymbals and stuff, like you physically see them flopping around and everything. So what we landed on, and this is, by the way, this is pre-production meetings that all this stuff got worked out in, which is kind of rare for the sound department unless it's a really important thing. Damien brought me in multiple times to talk about this stuff as they were setting up, because also this was a low budget movie. It was $3.5 million, and so they didn't have the luxury of just like fixing things later. We had to get it right there. And so what we decided on was that all of the band, like all of the horns and other, guitars and other stuff, that's all playback. And they recorded multiple different passes of each of the songs that we used in that movie, including things with mistakes and different time signatures and things like that were related to what Fletcher was telling them. So we had a Pro Tools session on set that had all of these different recordings available for us at any given day. And, Damien would work with the playback operator to pick out the specific tracks that he wanted to use for any given setup that we're doing. And we had it running through my recording equipment, and then from there I had a dedicated output to the speakers on set so that the band could all hear it. And the the actors that they hired to play the band are all actual musicians that played the specific instruments that they were playing. So they all learned all of the charts for real, and then they played them as pantomime on set. And we also rolled sound on these things, which is kind of abnormal for playback. But what Damien wanted to do was he wanted the room sounds as they were starting and as they were finishing, because like there's all these little details of people moving saxophone valves around and the drumsticks getting laid down on the rim of the drums, and just all this random hustle and bustle that goes into a class like that. And so it became a kind of a challenging dance of like playing the boom mic and the playback music and the drums and the dialogue all at the same time.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, that's such a audio heavy film. Like, no, you won an Oscar for it, and it's no wonder. It's so important because I can imagine it just taking immersion out of the film if some of that stuff is really off.
Yeah.
So, wow.
And I mean, we got lucky with that too. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, we were up against some heavy hitters when it came to the awards. I mean, we were up against Interstellar and American Sniper, and the Budapest Hotel movie, and one other that I can't remember. But either way, like those movies all had craft services budgets that were bigger than our whole movie. I was convinced that was going to be the factor that just crushed us, but it turns out that we captured the hearts of the Academy voters and got lucky.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's amazing too because Damien Chazelle has gone on to make some unbelievably big films after that. That was like one of his first ones. What was it like working with him on such an early part of his career? Like, was he someone that you knew was probably going to go on to be a big director, or was it just,
Oh yeah.
yeah?
So at that time, I had worked on a bunch of lower budget movies, and some things that had gotten a little bit of traction, but hadn't really taken off. And I'd worked with tons of directors that they all have different personalities and stuff, but didn't really seem to be like a Hollywood director, so to speak. And from the moment I read Whiplash, I could tell that the writing was impeccable. And then when I actually met him, like he's got an amazing creative brain, and I'm sure you've heard in the past people saying that a good director has the movie already shot in their head. And he's the first person I ever met that it really seemed like that was the truth with him. He knew everything about this movie inside and out, upside down and sideways. Like it was just an absolute joy to be able to throw questions at him and have an immediate answer, not a I don't know, maybe we'll do that, maybe we won't, let's try doing both of them kind of an answer. Like he was making decisions. He knew what he wanted, he knew how to get it, he knew when he had it, and didn't waste time indulging himself on things that may or may not end up in the end product. And so we had a relationship where I wanted to give him the best and he wanted to get the best, and he helped me help him do that. And part of that was out of necessity. Like I said, we didn't have a lot of money. We also didn't have a lot of time. So having things, prepared very well is going to help you out a lot when you only have 19 days to shoot a whole feature. And on top of that, he was also dealing with all the normal issues that go along with shooting a movie. So it just became this thing where we needed to nail it, and we did everything that we could to get it right. And we, again, we got lucky.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think, yeah, I read too, it was made in 19 days. I mean,
Yeah.
that's unbelievable. Was it full like 14, 12-hour days working?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think we had any ridiculously long days except for the very last day of shooting. Turned into a whole overnight shoot, and we wrapped at 6 in the morning, which was kind of funny because there's a bar in Los Feliz here that opens at 6 in the morning, and so half the crew went there and started drinking. It was one of the rare times where you can, be getting half in the bag at 7 a.m. and feel okay about it because we just worked all night, and we
That's
felt like
hilarious.
we felt like we had gotten something good at the time. But you really never know when it comes to whether an independent film is going to make it, or even more so, take off, like be a hit. So a lot of times there's kind of a throwaway attitude towards this because, like, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. We might never hear from these guys again.
Well, one thing I was curious about too, because you're on the set when Fletcher, the drum teacher there, is one of the most iconic characters now. Was that hearing it live go down? Was that just as invigorating as like seeing it on the film?
Oh yeah, yeah. And I mean, well, so for me it was like kind of a meta experience because, like, he's screaming at Neiman to be good and make something of himself and challenge himself and all this stuff, and I was kind of sitting there doing exactly the same thing, just in sound recording, and I wanted to nail every take, and so you end up being hyper focused on everything that's happening, and just being really tuned into what these characters are doing, and because of his delivery, I had to be on that gain knob, like without failure, because he would go from speaking a really intense low voice to almost a whisper to just the very next line just being 500% higher. And the thing with digital audio is, if it goes over the limit, then it just becomes digital garbage, and there's nothing you can do to recover that, or at least not back then anyway. So, for me, it was a pretty intense experience when that kind of stuff was happening, and when the less intense stuff was happening, I got to breathe a little bit and just kind of go for the ride, which is also nice. I mean, if you're working on something that you care about and actually are entertained by, it's almost like getting paid to just be there. Um, but at the same time, you have to perform. So, it was kind of both of those things.
Yeah. Wow, that's
And
amazing.
and also, I mean, I've been a fan of J.K. Simmons since I was in high school. So just being around people like that have that presence and that aura and that energy and on all that stuff, like it was equal parts thrilling and terrifying.
I just can't imagine going to a theater and seeing something like Whiplash and knowing that I was a big part of making that. Like for you,
Yeah,
that's got to be an amazing feeling. You can have that as something you look back on, and you've done so many films, not just that one, but that's got to be
yeah.
the best feeling.
Yeah, and I'll tell to put a point on that. Like once we found out that it was premiering at Sundance, I put a whole lot of effort into being there for that screening, and it came down to, like, obviously a lot of people want to get into those screenings, and it's kind of competition, but it came down to me literally being outside, like talking to the producer right as it was about to start. Like it was standing room only, and he basically just ushered me in, and I got to watch the premiere screening of it at Sundance. And when the credits like, it was thrilling to watch the movie itself, but when the credits rolled, the entire place, I think there was 1,100 people there, just absolutely exploded into cheers, blew the roof off of the place. And that was one of the most exhilarating experiences I've ever had.
Just a life highlight right there. That's crazy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. That's what all the people in the film industry dream of. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I want to transition here a little bit. You know, there's plenty of interviews online of people talking about how hard the film industry is, not enough pay, long hours. Is that something you've experienced? Has it been a pretty tough career?
As a person coming up, I would say absolutely. Working on non-union productions and things where there's not really any safety net for the workers, then things like exploitation become a much bigger factor. I've been fortunate for the past 15 years or so to be working almost exclusively on union stuff. And when I'm not, it's usually something pretty simple where I don't have to worry about being taken advantage of. But even then, things still happen where it's not like outright resentment for the crew, but frequently the producers are under a lot of pressure, not only financially but logistically with things, and a lot of things go wrong that set other things back, and it can be a cascading effect. But a lot of times when the workers end up getting exploited, it's usually because the people above us didn't prepare well enough, or they didn't provide themselves any contingency plans for if and when things go wrong. And there are, unwritten expectations from the crew that, like, we're going to work hard for you, but we also want you to take care of us in human ways, like, don't schedule 15 hours of work for us every single day and then just expect us to be super energetic and happy and everything all the time. Because we're going to be absolutely exhausted and we're not going to be able to give 100%. Don't screw around with us on food, or we're going to be angry and hungry and again, not appreciating being there. And there's many other factors to that, but it's like, if you want us to give us our all to you, then, you've got to make us at least feel wanted and appreciated. And, there's also laws that you're our employer that you have to follow and, like, keep us safe and not have an environment where the actor might shoot the camera person on set, or, other things where, like, stunt people have been horribly injured or even killed on set. There was an issue, I want to say in 2012, where a production was shooting illegally on an active train track, and a train came through and killed an assistant camera girl that was trying to rescue the slate at the last second and got hit by the train. And that created a whole big safety campaign for, crew workers. So there's a lot of things that the unions take care of. They help us standardize our hours and our pay rates and, safety precautions and training and, all kinds of stuff like that. But then there's also OSHA that, the labor regulations have to be followed, because we are workers. We're not just a happy group of idiots that are out there doing this for fun. We're employees that are trying to help this person make a product. And, so we need to be kept safe. We need to adhere to normal employment rules as well, and all of those things can be done. It's a complex process that needs a team of people that are, devoted to it and taking it seriously. And when that happens, it coalesces, and thousands of movies get made every year successfully, and most of them abide by all of those practices, and they're happier for it in general. But then there's also, just the same way that there's no barrier to entry for crew members, there's no barrier to entry for producers either. Anybody who's got a $100,000 or $1,000,000 or whatever can call themselves a producer and go out and hire a crew and start making whatever stupid, awful movie they want if they so choose. And a lot of the time when we run into problems, it's with those kinds of people that see themselves as greater than us, or see themselves as greater than the audience that they're trying to entertain. Like, once you start discrediting your crew and your audience and treating them as a commodity rather than a group of human beings, then you start doing things like exploiting them. and cutting massive corners and taking risks that, could affect the quality of your product, or not even being concerned with quality products in the first place. You might demand that your set decorator and your props people make the cheapest sets and the cheapest props that they can possibly imagine, and the costumes are made out of garbage bags, and there's all kinds of different ways that these things can go badly, and there's all kinds of different ways that they can go amazingly well. So it really matters, who the people that are involved are, and what their intentions are, and what their abilities are. It's when they say that filmmaking is a collaborative effort, like, that couldn't be more true.
Yeah. So, given that, there's been a lot of talk about where the film industry is headed now. A lot of people are saying Hollywood's dying. What do you say to that? What's your inside take on it?
It's been happening for a while, and it's a massively complex circumstance, I guess. Yeah, I mean, it's just stacking of multiple different factors. A lot of people say that it started when the old studios sold themselves to parent corporations back in the 80s. So we start getting what was formerly an entity that was only run by itself, that was only concerned with its own well-being, and only made movies. The only thing that they were concerned about was making good movies and getting them out to the people that would enjoy them, and generally speaking, the cream would rise to the top, and like, whoever made the best movies would make the most money, and that's kind of how things went for a good 80 years or so. But then all of a sudden, these financial people started getting involved, and they started saying, well, yeah, this is good, but can we make it for $100,000 less? Or can we, include some references to Ford Motor Company in there because they're giving us money, And, a lot of these things started getting put into the mix that were not concerned with making the best movie, And there's technological advancements also that have made the risk of making a movie much less. Like, as things become digital, camera and sound becoming digital, the amount of physical labor and the amount of actual things that could go wrong kept getting less and less and less. In order to get a single reel of film and a single reel of sound to the dailies operator, even, like, you had to take a group of people, secure these things for travel from the set, drive them physically to a lab somewhere where they have to get processed, and then they have to get physically married onto another piece of film that then gets printed again overnight in a speedy chemical process, and then delivered back to the set for the director and the camera guy to watch, so that they even know if what they shot yesterday was any good at all. Like, none of that is a factor anymore. Like, you can watch everything as it happens now, and even put, look profiles on the video so that you know what it's going to look like after you post it, and all this stuff. You watch playback instantly on set, and all these kinds of things. So everything that has happened since then has been an effort to make filmmaking cheaper, faster, less risky, and because of that, the stakes of choosing what you actually shoot and how to do it are much lower. And so there's, a continuing path towards, like, caring less about every individual frame of film that gets shot. And as that progression turned less from it's still an art form, but it was less of an artistic form of making a product, and now it's more of making a product that uses this technique to get made, And it's also become much more of a marketing tool for other stuff, And so the amount of specialness of these movies has gradually gone down, and the amount of specialness of having them made in like a place like Hollywood has also gone down. Now, I mean, they've always made movies elsewhere, but by and large, they would go there and shoot exteriors of wherever they need to be, and any kind of special architecture, any kind of things like that. But they would always come back to LA to go to the studio and build sets on a controlled environment, and this is where all the actors lived and all that kind of stuff. But as everything has been decentralized in the past 20 years, or more recently 10 years, you start to see the productions not prioritizing a place like Hollywood. You had to come to Hollywood previously because that's where all the technicians were. And if you had to have good technicians, you had to have good artists on your crew because, like I said, all those other factors, like if you just got some random guy that didn't know what he was doing, it's going to turn out awful and your movie's going to be awful. So now the digital technology has made things also cheaper and more capable than it was back in the day. So less people can do more with better quality. Like all these things serve to gradually tick down the specialness of Hollywood specifically. And then you get the financial thing like tax incentives, where a lot of states and other countries have seen, all this glitz and glamour and money and stuff that this industry generates. And they decided that they want to be in on it too. So they start creating income tax incentives where, they say, hey, if you come shoot your movie in Georgia or Hungary or Czechoslovakia or Australia or whatever, we'll pay for half your movie. But the only thing is you have to hire a local crew. So now we start getting this situation where there's just as many movies being shot this year as there was last year, but 90% of them are being shot in other countries like Canada or, the ones I just listed. And they all have the same rule that you have to hire local crew. So what ends up happening is, like, I used to get flown around to different places. I've worked all over the world, and that stopped. Like, I can only get hired on stuff that's shooting primarily in Los Angeles now, and that has really dropped. The commission has just recently posted a thing that studio rental time is down something like 70 or 80% over since COVID.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And
insane.
yeah, so it's a huge drop off, and it's also something where it's not like, oh well, I mean, yeah, sure, I could just up and move to London or Ireland or you know some other random country and try and maintain my career, but do I want to do that? I don't know. Should I have to do that? I don't think so. It's an unfortunate circumstance, but it's one that I didn't create, and but I still kind of have to deal with it.
Yeah. Wow, that's so interesting. Yeah, it almost seems like as you're talking about this that Hollywood or the US almost is kind of shooting themselves in the foot a little bit, turning it more into an industry than an art of kind of what it used to be. So,
Yeah,
yeah, that's interesting. I want to wrap up the interview here. I just have one final question for you,
for sure.
just kind of for fun. So, if you could only preserve one sound from one scene that you've ever done, and it's the only one you could be remembered by, what scene would it be?
That's a good question. If it was Whiplash, I would say it is the scene where Fletcher tells his class that his former student is dead. It was a Steadicam shot, and it was one of the only times that J.K. Simmons let me wire him. Part of it is that it's a really strong monologue from him, and it's a really important scene in the film. But also, like, it was being shot on a stage with a wooden floor, and the boards were creaking while the Steadicam guy was walking over them, which he had to do. And we had to kind of scramble and gather up the grips and the set building people and figure out a way to make these floorboards stop creaking, just so that we could get this one shot to work. And I remember it was like getting close to wrap time, and if it took longer, then like the location was going to charge us money, and like we maybe would go into overtime, which is going to mean that they have to pay the rest of the crew more, and like there were all these things that were stacking up, and I could tell that everybody just wanted to like get this damn thing shot and get out of here. But we were able to end up putting like screws in between the boards so that they wouldn't move when they got stepped on, and throwing a whole bunch of baby powder in there to like sort of lubricate the seams between the boards and stuff, and it worked, and we got two great takes out of it, and one of them's in the movie.
Love that. That is so fascinating. Wow. And so were you the one that decided you were the one helping with all the dampening of the floorboards, or was that other departments?
Yeah, I mean, when it becomes a high stakes problem, like you start to have like a group of people standing around, like throwing out ideas, but it really just took us committing to like you Grip, get me some screws, get me a screw gun right now, and we're like, can we do this? Like, I don't care, just do it, and so we just threw some screws in there, and somebody was trying to say that like soap would do it or wax would work or other these other things, but sometimes the best solution is the one that's right in front of your face.
Love it. That's awesome. Well, Tom, really appreciate your time, man. I know it's very valuable.
Yeah.
But I think this is going to be really helpful for a lot of people that just want to get more of an in-depth look. And there goes my camera again. More of an in-depth look into the film industry. So I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. And yeah, this is one thing to never forget is like problems are going to happen even when you don't want them to. And the show must go on, So thanks so much for having me, and I wish you good luck with all of this.
Awesome. Appreciate it, Tom.